My name is Dr. Kyle Grant, and I beat the often path by making laundry and wet cleaning sexy.
This is Beat the Often Path, and I'm your host, Ross Palmer. Now, on this show, we redefine success to mean something more than just money, and we amplify stories and people who deserve to be heard. Today, we talk about laundry and microplastics. What are microplastics, and what does your laundry have to do with them? I'm joined today by Dr. Kyle Grant, founder of a startup that's raised millions so far called Oxwash, a company that seeks to dramatically improve the way we do laundry. Because among other things, laundry is a major source of microplastics in our water. It turns out that washing our 80s tracksuit puts a lot of harmful crap back into the water supply. No, the problem's not the tracksuit, no matter what mom says, it's the laundry, okay? But first, why should you give a shit?
Why should you give a shit?
We know that plastics don't really break down ever, and that's why there's a plastic garbage patch the size of Texas floating in the Pacific Ocean. Rather than go away, plastic breaks off into tiny shards, and these shards are called microplastics. We can't detect them with the naked eye, but we are constantly consuming them just by drinking tap water, by eating food, by living our lives. You know, all that stuff. In fact, it's been said that we eat a credit card's worth of plastic each week. And to borrow a phrase from today's guest, vom. An article from the University of Plymouth says it is estimated that there are now trillions of microplastic particles in the marine environment. Microplastics are a threat to marine life and humans, and Camila Alexander White writes for RSC.org, microplastics can also exist on beaches and in deeper waters of the oceans where animals feed, and it's here that the main large-scale threats to wildlife exist. In addition to damaging wildlife, they harm us internally, because according to Damian Carrington, microplastics cause damage to human cells in the laboratory at the levels known to be eaten by people via their food, a study has found. And if you're like me and you eat Legos just for the fun of it, you're doubly screwed. Whether you realize it or not, children and adults might ingest anywhere from dozens to more than 100,000 microplastic specks each day, Zhaoji Lim writes for Nature.com. Basically, anytime plastic is agitated in water, tons and tons of microplastics are released, and laundry is an obvious culprit here. So Dr. Kyle Grant is here to explain how his groundbreaking new technology will make the world a better place and alleviate this issue, amongst many others. This is Beat the Often Path. And I'd like to begin this episode, as I promised, by singing an ode to oxen. So you come in from the fields. Obviously, your oxen are dirty, and your product helps clean your oxen, right? It's Oxwash.
Something like that. We've never cleaned a cow, but I would love to. I mean, why not?
Oh, wait, that's not what your company does? Oh, man.
No.
And here I have page after page of yokes about oxen. Just kidding. I'm just kidding. Okay, I'm utterly disappointed in myself.
I was
horrible.
I was on
You're
the
like, this
fence.
guy, he didn't do his homework.
I was like,
Come on.
Maybe it's really, really good, or it's really bad.
It's really good, or it's
I'm
really
going
bad.
on the good side.
Okay, all right. No, but what I really want to start by saying that Cambridge is the best school in the world. Boat race champions 85 times. The winningest boat race team, as we all know. The longest winning streak. How do you feel about that as an alum of Oxford?
Yeah, I think you're poking the snake intentionally, and I'm going to rise to it.
Okay.
I think what Oxford doesn't do, or what doesn't have in prestige on the rivers, it certainly does have in the washing machines and ironing presses of the future. Let's put it that way.
Okay, very good. Very, very delicately handled. I was trying to find a Cambridge fight song to sing to you, but I couldn't find one on Google, so I thought, like, with 800 years, they couldn't find a social media manager. So there is that, you know. How is this not easy to find?
Change.
Yeah, so anyways, all right, to the story at hand. What is it that you really do, and what is your company actually here to solve?
Of course, yeah. So I'll be completely honest, I kind of stumbled into the laundry and cleaning space completely by accident when I was doing a PhD at Oxford University in something called synthetic biology, all around genetic manipulation of crops, helping us to live in space and in arid deserts, all sorts of things. But my core focus then and in a prior life in aerospace was life support systems. How do you take to space or to an outpost all the resources you need to live perpetually, the water, the energy, food, all of that good stuff? Turns out that clothing and textiles don't have a good life support system. And the way that we wash clothes, whether it's our jeans, t-shirts, dresses, suits, even the bedding that we sleep in, typically pollutes the planet in a really big way and in a way that's completely opaque to most people around the world. You know, you go into a laundromat or you have a washing machine at home, you put your dirty items in the front of a chrome machine with a nice touch screen and it comes out smelling amazing and looking great.
Right.
But what goes down the drain at the back is awful, super toxic. And if you scale that up to big laundry facilities, often the bleach, the non-biodegradable chemistry, the microfibers of polyester, basically plastic, all going down the drain and into water, the drain, and then eventually the oceans is a huge problem. And all of the energy that's used to wash and then dry and then press all those items again and again and again is massive. In the UK, super small country, it would take 100 million trees, 100 years to sequester all the carbon that's generated from laundry in our small country. It's crazy.
And what time frame is that? Per year?
Yeah, that's in 100 years. It would take 100 million
100 years.
trees,
100 million trees. Unbelievable.
It's expensive to heat water, right? And
Yeah.
you're using thousands of liters of it. And then to heat air to tumble dry things, it's just crazy. And most of the time, that energy just comes from coal or gas.
That is shocking. So I didn't know the depth of this. This is going to be a great chat. I can tell already. All right. Well, before we jump into the actual platform, so I saw that you were working at NASA at a certain point. So tell me about your education. So obviously you achieved your doctorate. How did that part go before you founded this company?
Yeah, so I was back doing a undergraduate honours degree at Cardiff University, the capital of Wales here in the UK. And it was all around microbiology and then kind of segued into doing a project on using algae as a life support system basis rather than pretty harsh scrubbing chemicals. Got an internship, turned into a co-op, turned into a full-time position in the States at the Kennedy Space Center, which was awesome. Then did quite a lot of work kind of after that, a little bit of a secondment over to SpaceX as well in the early days, which was absolutely eye-opening. And as you can imagine, has changed quite a lot since back in the day when you're in a big garage, basically bolting together parts of a spaceship. But it was when my visa expired that I came back and kind of started the PhD to then potentially look to go back into aerospace, but then got sucked into this lovely, wonderful world of washing instead.
Yeah. Did you want to stay in the US or were you done?
Yeah, I think back then, definitely. Yeah, 100%.
And between SpaceX and NASA, nobody could figure out an extension for your visa?
Well, it's tricky. I was on a J1 visa, which back then had a very strict time limit on it, and rightly so, right? And there's also ITAR kind of qualifications you have to pass around. You know, you are basically tinkering with an intercontinental ballistic missile, even if it is meant to have people on it. So there's all sorts of hoops you have to jump through that got harder and harder. So decided to come back to do the PhD as then the route in again, but then found this new mission instead.
Right. I've seen James Bond. I know how that goes. You put a tiny little chip on the inside of the part that you're supposed to be welding, and suddenly you're tracking everything in the United States. I think
there you go.
I think they made the right choice. No, but that is as awesome of a background as I've heard, yet not too many people come from that kind of background. That's truly fascinating. I mean, SpaceX, NASA, that's cutting edge. And you raise interesting points. I've often thought about microplastics, but not from that perspective. I think many of us who have been watching the news or who follow these kinds of things know that microplastics are in general an issue. It's been said that people consume a credit card's worth of microplastic per week via water or other means. So for me, I was looking towards sources like my drinking water, and that led me to purchase what we have this company called a Berkey filter, which is this very slow filter, but it supposedly filters out all that stuff, and I drink all of my water through that because you can't trust the tap water, certainly here in the US, and certainly here in Los Angeles. So I'd been thinking about it more from that aspect. I hadn't been thinking about it from the aspect of where is the stuff actually coming from, and certainly hadn't been thinking that my laundry might be the cause of this. So how did you make that leap? You're trying to make something sustainable for space missions. How did you decide that laundry was the culprit of a lot of this stuff?
Mm. So I think what really attracted me to this space and the industry as a whole is that it's very unsexy. You know, people don't go to university, to graduate school, and say, I want to go and revolutionize the way we wash knickers and socks, right?
Right.
It's not something you typically
Especially
find.
after
But because of
SpaceX,
that,
it's like rocket ships
yeah,
and socks.
yeah, but I mean, it's really, really ripe for innovation because of that, right? So there's a lot of technologies that have been maybe developed in some industries that just have never had a look in washing, and that means you can make a lot of gains in this space quite quickly using common sense and, quite frankly, stealing other technologies, modifying them, innovating, and bolting them together. What really interests me, though, is this next kind of almost valley that we're going into now of recreating new ways of washing and drying things. You know, can you dry things using ultrasonic vibrations rather than in a tumble dryer? You know,
Ooh.
those weird and wonderful tools that you'd never think of if you just kind of, you know, worked in a facility for your whole life. You know, your mum did it, you do it the same way. So I like that. And I think because it's such a big problem that people aren't aware of, as soon as you lift the lid and say, actually, here's all the shit that just came off your jumper, they go, oh, vom. Okay, I'm going to pay you to help me fix this problem. And even better is that I would like to join you on your mission and work as part of the team to make real change. So because of that purpose, and it's very clear what we're trying to do, we've been able to get some really talented people to join our team. So that's very rewarding as well.
This episode is brought to you by the new credit card from Capital One, Microplastic. It's the first credit card that you don't need to order because it's already inside your body. You ate it in your food and drank it in your water. Millions of undetectable microplastics already in your body now, just from the last week of being alive. All you have to do is activate the new credit card's worth of plastic you've unintentionally ingested. Microplastic from Capital One. What's in your gastrointestinal tract? What was the first seed of this idea?
So the first bit was actually, how do you move laundry around without generating even more CO2, particulates, traffic, things like that? Here in the UK, Oxford specifically, it's a very small, congested city, you know, with ancient roads that were meant for horses and carts, not for massive articulated lorries bringing hundreds of tons of linen to hotels and gyms and things like that, right? So when you look at, you know, let's say a kilogram of laundry that somebody generates, either in their business or their home, and then they send it to somebody else to wash and then bring it back, about 40% of the CO2 emitted is in the logistics, just moving the shit from the person or business to the washing facility and back. So we decided, no, that's got to stop. So we tested lots of different assets, logistics, you know, platforms for moving things around, mopeds, electric, you know, normal gas ones, cars, vans, and eventually ended up on this very new asset called an electric cargo bike, which looks a little bit like a love child between a small van and a bike that you'll go riding at weekends on. And they're awesome. Honestly, they're absolutely fantastic. They're very much like a little urban spaceship. You know, they're very quick, agile, they nip through traffic, they don't generate any CO2. And critically, they're hyper visible. You know, people see them and go, what the hell is that? And then they're on Google, they find our website, they understand the mission, and then you acquire your customers through just eyesight rather than, you know, blasting hundreds of thousands of pounds on TV ads and Google ads and stuff like that. So that was the first kind of part we wanted to solve for, get the asset and the logistics software, route optimization, things like that working harmoniously. And then obviously the biggest problem, the bit where we had a lot of innovation, is how do you clean something without polluting the planet? what technologies can you use, what chemistries, water reclamation systems do we need to innovate, design to do that. So that's been our mission ever since, is iterating on that. And we've got multiple facilities where we're testing different things to try to get to that nirvana of a wash load that produces no CO2, no microplastics down the drain, no what we call bioactive chemistry that obviously eviscerates the ecosystem. And we're getting close, but we're not there yet.
Okay. So the first machine, how did you start building? What did you start creating?
So we call our facilities lagoons,
Okay.
and that's only because the floor is blue, bright blue, and looks a bit like a swimming pool, but we can't call them pools because that's weird. And the first facility, we partnered with a equipment manufacturer in Spain to design and build a system for us where you take a normal washing machine, we've bolted on a water filtration and reclamation system. So in essence, when you do a wash cycle at home or in a laundrette, you'll do some pre-rinses with water, a main wash cycle where you have your detergent, maybe some emulsifiers, things like that. And then final rinses where you rinse all of that away and maybe add a conditioner or softener at the end to give you the nice smell and the texture. So in our system, that wash water and the final rinses is reclaimed into a tank. And then we reuse that water for the pre-rinses of the next wash load.
Mm-hmm.
And you save between 40 and 60% of the water per wash load doing that. And at the same time, you're able to filter out the microfibers that leach and come off the clothes as you're washing them, which means it doesn't go down the drain, which is great. We also try to wash things cold. So whatever temperature water comes out the cold tap, we wash at that temperature by and large. And that's great because it saves enormously on energy costs. But as you can imagine, it doesn't remove stains or disinfect things incredibly well. So we've had to develop new formulations of chemistry with some partners. Here in the UK, there's one called Vanish, which is a little bit like Oxy-Action, I think it's called in the States.
OxyClean. We had
like
these famous infomercials back in the day.
Yeah.
Very famous guy.
Super similar to that.
Yes. Okay.
This is it. So
He was onto
similar
something.
principle. Yeah, absolutely. I think, unfortunately, he was onto it probably with bleach, which is really nasty. So we're trying to get the same result without that crap, that typically you put down the toilet, which is great. But disinfecting at low temperatures is the biggest problem, especially with COVID, right? Like, how does somebody trust you to take their clothes away, wash them, not cover them with somebody else's COVID particles, and then ship them back? So we use something called ozone to disinfect our laundry at low temperatures. In fact, it doesn't work above 30, 40 degrees. And that's super simple. We generate ozone gas from the air that we breathe in something called a corona, basically like flowing air through a lightning storm in a tube. And then we bubble that up through the laundry as it's washing. And that oxidizes all the bacteria, fungi, viruses, critically, and has the added bonus of any body odor and nasty smells. It gets rid of that and deodorizes as well. So there's a couple of different pieces of the washing puzzle to wet your whistle.
That's truly remarkable. And at the end, if you're not putting these microplastics down the drain, do you just end up with giant chunks of plastic, or what do you do with all of that?
Yeah, I'll be honest, we're storing it at the moment because we're trying to figure out what to do with it. We've got honestly bags of this stuff, and it's tricky because it's a real mix of stuff. The filter isn't selective. It'll filter out the microfibers of polyester, cotton, nylon, dog hair, cat hair, bits of food, like the lot. So it's now down to what do we do with that? There's lots of ideas of could you use it to make loft insulation, for example, because actually its latent heat capacity is very good. Could we compress it and make packaging? Potentially. It's something that we'll likely find a partner to help us to obviously produce a product from, but we're storing it until we get that right, rather than it going into landfill or anything else, God forbid.
Right. So what's the ratio? How many loads of laundry produce how many pounds of this stuff?
Yeah. So if you were to take a week load, like an individual person's week load of laundry, which is probably 4 to 7 loads, something like that,
Sure.
you would get probably the amount of microplastics you'd find in the weight of an iPhone. which is in this case a max, so the bigger one.
Yeah.
So it's a lot. It is a lot. It depends on the items, but something like a fleece will leach a lot more microfibers than something like a sports vest, which has much tighter packed fibers. And obviously the temperature, the aggravation of like, how fast you spin the machine and things like that has a massive impact as well.
That's great. It has to be. What's your current capacity at this moment?
Yes, we have 3 sites, or lagoons, as we call them. One in Oxford, one in Cambridge, and then one in Battersea in London. And early next year, we'll probably be breaking ground on a much larger one somewhere in the southeast of England that will serve most of the UK, which is very exciting. And we turn through, at the lagoon level, our smallest lagoon will do 2.5 tons of laundry a week. Our largest one is able to do probably between 5 and 7.5 on a kind of single shift, but they were designed to operate round the clock, just like an Amazon fulfillment center or something like that. And that's kind of where we're getting to.
So when you started this, how quickly did you have some sort of validation to where you knew you were onto something? Was it almost immediate? Were there difficult moments?
Yeah, I think it would have been probably 8 months in where we'd had a couple of small micro validations, things like I'd be cycling around with my bike and my backpack, and somebody would stop me in the street and say, "Hey, do you do laundry?" I'd say, "Yes." And they'd be like, "I own an Airbnb. It's a nightmare. I'm always doing laundry." And I'd be like, "Perfect. Here's your quote." And they'd be like, "Great. Yeah, can you double it if you can get it back to me tomorrow?" And it's like, "Oh, this is all right." But it was when we partnered with a large laundry processing facility to do the processing side, and I went to visit it, that I was like, "Oh shit, this is awful." You walk in and you get hit with this blast of like hot, wet, chlorinated air.
Yeah, I was gonna say that
like
chlorine.
A really dank swimming pool. Yeah,
I know
and
that
it's
smell.
really nasty.
Ugh.
Yeah, and all facilities like that in the UK kind of are the same. I went to see one after the other, and they got from bad to worse. And that was that moment where I was like, this is perfect. It's so crap. It can really be innovated a lot faster. There's great people in the industry, lots of legacy businesses run by, kids that have inherited it from their parents, who've inherited the business from their parents. But the technology, the time and the attention to the industry just has never been there. And therefore, they've kind of just been left alone, which is a real shame.
Do you feel that there has been something counterintuitive that you have done or against the grain that has led to your success? Any sort of unusual thing that you believe that others maybe don't?
God, there's so many small ones. They kind of all add up. I think the kind of biggest ones, I've mentioned it already, are you don't need to boil shit to get it clean. You can use technology to do that. I think also, the macro one is that you can have profitability and save the planet at the same time. I think historically people have seen those two things as mutually exclusive, which they're not. If you think about it at the macro level, if you have certain costs of goods sold, like electricity, water, gas, chemistry, all this kind of stuff, and you use less, but get stuff even more clean, obviously that's better for your business.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
And I think a lot of people are like, no, that doesn't make sense. It must be crap. It must be low quality. And you're like, no, that's not it. And it comes down to just proving that time after time, right? Doing the basics right, turning up on time with clean clothes that belong to the right person. If you get that right, and then back that up with, actually, we've offset this amount of CO2 versus you doing it yourself. You save this much water, and all that hassle as well. It's very powerful. So I think that's probably the most counterintuitive thing that we're still trying to beat. Haven't beaten, but it's a great challenge.
Simply devoting ourselves fully to something that can prevent some of these issues, I think, is a noble pursuit. So I think what you're doing is tremendous. And I'm very
thank you very much.
Honored that you sat down and shared your story with me. I think it's actually more fascinating. And that's the beauty of doing this. I often learn things that I didn't know from conversations like this. And what on the outside seems like a relatively simple or straightforward thing. If you look at your website, and that's by design, obviously, for your would-be customer, it has to be a simple, straightforward thing. But then when we talk more, you dive under the surface a little bit and you see that there's a lot of machinery and moving parts and really cool things going on that you're doing. So I'm deeply humbled that you took this hour and spent it with me. So thank you very much.
My pleasure. It's a lovely conversation. Thank you very much indeed.
And of course, I'd like to leave the last word to you. So I'll give you the floor. Anything that you want people to do or donate to or focus on or visit or support you in any way, the floor is yours for the final thoughts.
No, that's very kind. I think my first thing would be try buying secondhand clothes. The good that you can do by giving a garment an extra life is massive, and it's what you don't see. To manufacture a pair of jeans is 20 years of your drinking water. It's bonkers. If you can go down to a thrift store and give something a new home, a second life, maybe a third life, maybe even a fourth, it's phenomenal and a massive impact. And you can find some gems in those stores. So that would be my one tip.
Okay, great. You've got a convert over here. I can't wait until your stuff comes over here to the west coast of the U.S. Probably won't be too many years, I'm sure. Maybe a couple, but
hopefully not.
You'll be here soon enough, and I look forward to that
hopefully
day.
Months.
Oh, really? Well,
months rather
all right.
than years.
Well, drop me a line. Yeah, we'll keep in touch. Again, thank you so much. Pleasure to meet you. And with that, the official podcast is over. Now, if you enjoy stories like this, please share this episode. Share it right now with somebody who needs to hear it. Share it on LinkedIn. Share it on social media. Share it on your platform of choice. Rate the show 5 stars. Leave a nice comment. Leave a nice review. That's really all I ask for delivering all of this value. So if you like this show, support it in any way you can, and I will really, really, really appreciate it. Also support Dr. Kyle Grant's business, and hopefully it'll be arriving in your town soon enough. As always, thanks for listening to the Beat the Often Path podcast. I'm your host, Ross Palmer, and I will see you again next Friday.